I kept the consent forms in my office for 11 years. Not copies, the originals. Blue ink on yellow paper. The ones the families signed before their children entered the trial. I'm a pediatric infectious disease specialist. I was working at Kano Infectious Disease Hospital in 1996 when the meningitis outbreak hit northern Nigeria. We had 200 children in our ward, more arriving every hour. Bacterial meningitis, the kind that kills in days if you don't treat it, the kind that leaves survivors deaf, brain damaged, or both. We were using the standard protocol: chloramphenicol, intramuscular injection every 6 hours. It works if you catch it early enough. But we were running out. And even with treatment, we were losing children. That's when they arrived. The team from Pfizer came in on April 3, 1996. 5 American doctors, 3 translators, 1 drug trial coordinator. They had a new antibiotic, Trovan. It had never been tested in children with meningitis before. They had approval. They showed me the paperwork to conduct a trial, comparing Trovan in oral form to ceftriaxone. 200 children. Half would get Trovan at 100 milligrams per kilogram per day. Half would get ceftriaxone, but at 100 milligrams per kilogram per day. The recommended dose for bacterial meningitis was 150 to 200 milligrams per kilogram per day. They needed it done in 3 weeks. They wanted FDA submission by July. I was assigned as the on-site medical supervisor. My job was patient selection, daily monitoring, and obtaining informed consent from the families. The trial coordinator handed me the consent forms on April 5th. Pre-printed, English on one side, Hausa translation on the other. I read them carefully. The English version said, "We are offering your child an experimental treatment that may help. There are risks. You may withdraw at any time. Standard treatment remains available." That's not what the Hausa version said. The Hausa version said, "We are providing your child with medicine. No mention of experimental. No mention of trial. No mention of alternative treatment." The word for study appeared once, in a context that made it sound like medical examination. I asked the trial coordinator about the discrepancy. He said the forms had been approved by the Institutional Review Board. He said the translation had been checked. He said in a public health emergency, full disclosure could cause panic and reduce enrollment. He said the families were being offered a treatment they wouldn't otherwise have access to. He said I should focus on selecting appropriate candidates and monitoring outcomes. I asked what would happen if I refused to use those forms. He said the trial would proceed with or without me. He said they had authorization from the Nigerian government. He said Pfizer would find another on-site coordinator. He said it would be better for the children if someone who actually cared about them was involved in the process. So I signed off on the consent forms. Over the next 11 days, 200 children were enrolled. I explained to each family, in Hausa, using my own words, that we were trying a new medicine, that there were risks, that they could refuse. But I handed them the forms that didn't say what I said, and they signed. Because their children were dying, and we were doctors, and they trusted us. 11 children died during the trial, 5 in the Trovan group, 6 in the reduced-dose ceftriaxone group. The trial report, published internally at Pfizer in June 1996, and later submitted to the FDA, noted that Trovan demonstrated equivalent efficacy to ceftriaxone. It did not mention the dose reduction. It did not mention that the standard ceftriaxone dose would have been higher. It did not mention that 3 children who died had shown signs of hepatotoxicity consistent with Trovan's known side effects in adults. The trial ended on April 25th. The team left on April 27th. They thanked me for my cooperation. They said the data would help save countless lives. They said Pfizer would be submitting Trovan for approval in multiple indications, including pediatric use. They left the consent forms with me for my records. In December 1997, Trovan was approved by the FDA for adult use in the United States. In June 1999, it was withdrawn from most markets worldwide after reports of severe liver toxicity and deaths. 16 deaths in Europe alone. The European Union banned it entirely. The FDA restricted it to life-threatening infections with no alternative treatment available. The pediatric indication was never approved. In 2001, the families began filing lawsuits. 30 families initially, then 50, then over 200. They sued Pfizer in US federal court for conducting an illegal trial, for failing to obtain informed consent, for using a reduced dose of ceftriaxone as the control in order to make Trovan look more effective, for prioritizing speed and patent timelines over child welfare. Pfizer's defense was that they had received approval from the Nigerian government, that the trial was conducted according to local standards, that the consent forms were adequate under the circumstances, that the deaths were unavoidable outcomes of a meningitis outbreak, not caused by the trial protocol. The case moved through the courts for 9 years. Discovery, depositions, expert testimony, jurisdictional challenges, appeals. In 2009, Pfizer settled with the Nigerian government for $75 million. In 2011, they settled with the families. The terms were confidential, estimated between $30 and $40 million total, roughly $150,000 per family. I was deposed twice, once in 2003, once in 2007. Both times I brought the consent forms. Both times I explained the discrepancy between the English and the Hausa versions. Both times I stated that I had raised the issue with the trial coordinator. Both times I confirmed that I had proceeded anyway. Both times I was asked why. The lawyer for the families asked me, "Doctor, you knew these forms were misleading. You knew the families were not being told the truth. Why did you sign off on them?" I said, "Because the children were dying, because I thought the new drug might work, because the alternative was standing by and watching them die anyway, because I believed the people running the trial knew more than I did." The lawyer said, "But you're a doctor. You took an oath." I said, "Yes, I took an oath, and I broke it, because in that moment, I thought saving lives was more important than following rules." After the settlements, I kept working at the hospital. Same ward, same diseases, same corridors where the trial had taken place. Some of the parents still brought their children to me. Some refused to come back. I didn't blame either group. I kept the consent forms in a locked drawer in my office. I'm not sure why. Evidence, maybe. Or penance. Or just proof that it happened the way I remembered. In 2018, I was appointed to Nigeria's National Health Research Ethics Committee. One of my responsibilities is reviewing clinical trial applications for informed consent adequacy. I review about 40 applications per year. Pharmaceutical companies, foreign research institutions, vaccine studies, drug efficacy trials. I reject roughly 30% of them for consent form deficiencies. Last month, I reviewed an application from a different pharmaceutical company. New antibiotic, pediatric population, consent forms in English and Hausa. The English version used clear language about experimental status, risks, and alternatives. The Hausa version was nearly identical. Nearly. One sentence was softened. The English said, "This treatment is experimental and has not been proven safe in children." The Hausa said, "This treatment is new medicine that is being carefully studied." Small difference. Probably unintentional. Possibly just awkward translation. I rejected the application. The company appealed. They said the translation was adequate. They said I was being overly technical. They said delays in approval would cost lives in communities already facing high child mortality. They said it was better to offer something than nothing. I upheld the rejection. I drafted the formal response myself. 3 pages. I cited the Declaration of Helsinki, the Nuremberg Code, the Belmont Report. I referenced case law. I included the exact wording discrepancy with linguistic analysis showing how experimental and carefully studied carry different implications of risk and certainty in Hausa. I didn't mention that I had written almost the same analysis in 2003 for my deposition. Only then, I'd been explaining why the discrepancy didn't matter. The 11 children who died during the trial are buried in Kano. I know where. I've been to the graves. Not all of them. Some families moved away, but the one's still there. I don't go often, maybe once a year. I don't bring flowers. I don't pray out loud. I just stand there for a few minutes and think about the consent forms their parents signed. The ones that said, "We are providing your child with medicine." The ones I handed them. The ones I now use as the reference standard when I teach the informed consent module to medical students. I show them the yellow paper, the blue ink. I explain what the English said, what the Hausa said. I tell them 11 children died. I don't tell them I was the one who distributed the forms. I present it as someone else's failure.